You ain't nothing but a hound dog, you're crying all the time. You ain't nothing but a hound dog.
Time once again for our segment, Ask the Doc, from our good friend Dr. Maryweather from All Creatures Veterinary Center, 24/7 Animal Clinic, Veterinary Clinic, also not to be confused with and in conjunction with and in partnership with Canyon Country Veterinary Hospital. They are not a 24/7 operation, but they are on this side of town on Soledad next to the Regal Cinema. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
We really should have probably found a something for a song about birds, but I didn't really. Maybe
I love our new theme song.
Maybe Rock and Robin or something next time. Who knows?
That would be cool.
Speaking of birds, now last week you were on. We talked about rabbits and reptiles as pets and what you have to kind of plan for. And birds, though, kind of a different thing because there's really what I've noticed in bird ownership. In some cases, it's the companion, the kind of little Salty the parrot on your right shoulder, the cockatiel, or the little parakeet. But there are also the types where like the finches. That's like a whole slew of them. And so there are different types of birds for different types of
people. There's
people.
a lot of different ways you can own birds.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and let's talk more about the type that maybe are trainable. What about maybe like a parakeet, cockatiel, parrots that, in other words, a little bit more, you can bring them out of the cage and do things like that. What do people need to think about and how much time do they need to put into something like that?
So kind of, this is like a ongoing theme. So it very much is one of the things that this isn't really a really good impulse buy, and that you really need to think about what you want to get out of this relationship, especially with our birds. We're talking years, if not decades,
right,
of companionship. So really, doing your due diligence in the beginning can really bring much better rewards in the long term.
And understanding also not only their diet and health concerns, but also their personalities, right?
Yeah, personalities, and then also like mental needs, stimulation, the cage setup, enrichment, all of those things.
Exactly.
And it's not just parrots. You can see a lot of pretty intelligent passerines out there too.
What's a passerine?
So the passerines are going to be the finches, but
Okay.
they'll also be things like crows, ravens, all those things. So there are intelligent passerines. We generally don't keep them as pets.
I was going to say, do many people have crows as pets? I mean, aside from those who maybe are using them in training and show business and things like that.
No, not really. And I wouldn't recommend it either. But I think anyone who's ever tried to battle them in their yard can pretty much attune to the fact that they can be quite the adversatory. So there's a lot of intelligent bird species.
Crows are incredibly intelligent.
Incredibly intelligent, yeah.
I was watching a documentary on them where they were comparing them to like the same type of learning environment as what babies would do, and they were like right up there with like how they can learn their intuition. So yes, they are very, I can imagine they'd be
they can
very
figure
wily.
out puzzles. It's pretty impressive.
So in talking about going back to the ones that are a little bit more warmer and fuzzier, we're talking about the one, like I said, because I know people who've had them and they bring them and they got them on their shoulder or even, sitting on their head, which is kind of weird because you got to remember that birds are not necessarily going to hold it in, as it were. And you may have something in your hair that resembles that might be on your windshield, right? So you got to keep that in mind. But talking about that, what is it from the approach of if you know nothing about birds, but you want one of those types that you can put on your finger, put on your shoulder, and have a little Polly or whatever walk around with you? What is it you really need to kind of think about in planning to get one of those?
Well, there's a lot of research as far as the particular species, and so a lot of people think of like cockatiels or budgies, parakeets as like beginner pets, and they're really not. We were talking about creatures that can live, in the budgie world, 7, 10, 15 years.
Right.
And cockatiels can live into their 20s if they're, kind of well taken care of. And so it's a pet that's going to be around for a while, and, can be very fulfilling relationships with them. They're great pets. And, I think they get a kind of a rep as a beginner pet that is, in my opinion, not well deserved.
Right. We'll talk about beginner pets and more after this break. We are talking with Dr. Maryweather from All Creatures Veterinary Center. Just got off the shift.
Yep.
I take it 24/7 operation because pets do not always get ill during normal business hours. But also we have normal business hours clinic out here in Canyon Country, Canyon Country Veterinary Center on Soledad next to Regal Cinema. We will be right back with more Ask the Doc on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog, you're crying all the time.
And we're back
But a hound
with our segment, Ask the Doc. courtesy of All Creatures Veterinary Center. And I know you take care of hound dogs. You've taken care of my hound dogs, actually, Dr. Maryweather.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful place to go because really in warm and inviting atmosphere, especially the one on, I haven't been to the one in Canyon Country. I don't know if it's as chandelier-y and gothic, but either way, you guys do great work. So the Canyon Country Veterinary Center, of course, as well on Soledad next to Regal Cinemas. So we were talking about birds. I want to talk a little bit about birds as beginner pets. Because we talked a little bit about the people who think they want to walk in and instantly have Salty the parrot on their shoulder, or the parakeet, or the lorikeet, or any other types of keets that they might be able to take out and put on their little finger in the whole 9 yards. But when we're talking about, first of all, people getting birds, is it mostly maybe because of a space confinement, or is just maybe they're not really big on the dogs and cats? Or what do you find that people are who own birds?
I often find it's not so much that people are avoiding other types of pets so much as they love birds. It's definitely, I think, a creature that appeals to a lot of people. I know I have one myself,
right.
And it's a different experience than, the relationship you might have with like your dog or your cat.
Do they respond to affection the way dogs and cats do as much, or are they kind of like, yeah, that's nice, but
that largely depends on what species you're working with. Especially a lot of the parrots like really thrive on attention. And so kind of the type of interaction might differ from species to species, but a lot of it is, once you kind of learn parrot body language, they're very expressive little creatures.
Is a parrot a good entry-level bird to
No.
get? Okay. What type would be like something that you'd consider?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on kind of what your needs are. I think even if you haven't owned birds before, something like a cockatiel or a budgie is a great introduction, but you have to do your research first.
It's like any pet.
Yeah.
Do a little reading, go pick up a book, or do the research.
It's not just something that you can stick in a cage and, kind of forget about half the time.
Right.
And they're nothing like dogs or cats.
Right.
And so it's it's not necessarily that it's difficult, it's that it's different.
And they're like, they kind of rely on their own environment and the type of level of stress or non-stress that's there, just like any other pet. And also, they can be very, very loud as too, so you sometimes have to consider that particular environment, and that maybe they're not as, they don't quiet down at night or anything like that, do they? Or does it really matter?
They totally can.
Okay.
It really depends on, a lot of parrots, small and large, thrive on a schedule. And so they're kind of a lot like toddlers in that way, in that you pretty much, you're teaching them. It's a teaching relationship. It's a training relationship where you're telling them what to expect. And so kind of, they're definitely one of those creatures, the more you put out into them, the more you'll get out of the relationship.
Now, a little while back we talked, and it was a great... there's a phrase for it, and I can't remember what it was. And it's
captive foraging.
Captive foraging. Oh, I can never remember that. And that's something to consider. I want to bring that back around and talk a little bit about that and what it is and why it's important, especially for your birds.
Okay, so parrots, all parrots, even really the little guys, are wild creatures that we're bringing into the home. And so there's a lot of kind of unique challenges from that standpoint. One of them being that they have instinctual needs that we have to fulfill. And obviously the cage in your living room is not a natural environment. And so, they have social needs. Many parrots come from complex social structures in the wild where they have many relationships with many different types of birds. And it's often a very fluid type of changing relationship kind of within the flock. And so they often have very complex social needs. They also have very complex grooming needs, chewing needs, nest building, all sorts of things that they normally would do in the wild that they can't do here. As well as things like figuring out puzzles, especially when you're getting into the bigger birds. They have a really large kind of mental stimulation requirement to their daily lives in order to really be kind of happy, fulfilled individuals.
So it's just a situation where you're setting up these things so that maybe they have to do a little bit of work to get their food or things like that. And then people can find out. They can either call you to talk about captive foraging, come in, or they can look online and things like that.
Yeah, there's lots of stuff online now. And the point of captive foraging is that in the wild, they spend lots and lots of time flying to find food, trying to figure out food, remembering where things were last year, for example, and all those things. Whereas today, they find it in their breakfast bowl and it's perhaps the same thing every day.
But it helps them stimulate, helps them remember, keeps their identity.
And
in the
it's
whole
it's
thing.
something, and a lot of them find it really, really encouraging. A lot of it, it's a lot of fun. It's a puzzle that they're participating in, either on their own or oftentimes also with their people.
A busy bird is a happy bird. Dr. Maryweather, thank you so much for stopping by again. Ask the Doc segment from All Creatures Veterinary Center is a 24/7 operation. They're on Lyons Avenue, in between Newhall and Main Street on the Victorian Building, and then also don't forget All Creatures or Canyon Country Veterinary Center on Soledad. Not 24/7 operation, but even still, Soledad next to Regal Cinemas in Canyon Country. Thanks so much for stopping
Thanks
by
for
once
having
again.
me.
Always fun.